An interesting weekend to break down in Charlotte Hornets land. They did get the win against the Portland Trailblazers last night, 2-1 post All-Star break. We'll break it all down today. Locked on Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We are free and available anywhere you get your pods. And as always, that includes YouTube. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, meaning you can make every moment more right now with new customers getting $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. There's Doug Branson. You can find his work on his substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. We've been referencing old box scores recently too, so make sure you go check out everyhornetsboxscore.com, and you can listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 on Wes and Walker 92.7 FM. We've been referencing old box scores, Doug, because on this West Coast road trip, this little mini one they have after the All-Star break, they're making history with a couple of these victories. I got to tell you, I don't think I realized how long it had been since the Hornets beat Utah in Utah. They did so right out of the All-Star break, and that was for the first time since 2006. The box score was great. The starting lineup was excellent. They had Jermaine Jones in there. They had Primoz Brežić in there. So that was fantastic. And then something very similar takes place last night. The Hornets get their first win against the Trailblazers in Portland for the first time since 2008. Now, this is a different Bobcats box score. I know you can reveal some of the names there with 2008, but it's the first time that they're able to get these wins. And I guess we're creeping up on 15 years, more than 20 years, in the Utah sake, we're almost there. It's crazy to see that they're able to do this, but they win 93-80.
It's insane because when they went from Bobcats to Hornets, it's hard to remember, but there were good years. There was 2015.
I thought about this too. I thought the same thing. It's funny, it's the first time the Hornets, even though the Bobcats are the most clowned team, understandably, I get it, understandably, in NBA history, but it's the first time since the Bobcats were the team to accomplish this, all the way back in the 2000s.
Well, listen, it's difficult to travel out west, so I guess it makes sense that the droughts were in Portland, and then Utah, you've got some elevation issues there in Utah as well. So, I guess it kind of makes sense, but it is a perfect storm of things happening right now to exercise those demons. You have the Hornets coming off the break. They were coming in with momentum. They've got new players. They are playing at least with energy on the defensive end of the floor, maybe not so much on the offensive end of the floor. And then Utah got worse after the deadline, and they weren't good to begin with. And then you've got Portland, which is they're cellar dwelling. And really, if you looked at the injury report pre-game, which then the Hornets would then match by resting Seth Curry. These are two teams that were doing a little battle here for some tanking, I think, and Portland won that battle. But a perfect storm here for the Hornets to exercise some demons. So it was fun to see.
Ugly game to watch against Portland. Ugly game.
Yeah, that wasn't fun.
It was nice to get the win, but it wasn't fun to watch. 93-80, as I mentioned. The Hornets didn't get over 25 points in any of these quarters, but they were just a couple of points away every single time. And Portland, just to paint their picture, how about 3 of 32 from the three-point line? They kept taking them. They just kept taking them and taking them and taking them and missing every single one near about 35% from the field, just from the field straight up, and 9%, 9 on 30 attempts from three-point range. Fruit salad, yummy, yummy, Doug. This one was tough.
Oh, man, yeah. So shout out to Mike Richmond, our guy, for Locked On Blazers. We know your pain. It's not as if we're definitely not making fun of you.
Now. Right, we get to make them. It's weird.
Yeah, it was bad. And Anthony Simons was really their main offensive weapon. Certainly Jeremy Grant can score as well, but he had a tough night too. But Simons, but credit to the Hornets defense, because I think they came in with a game plan of we're going to double Simons a lot. We're going to take him away, side pick and roll. We're not going to let him try to get middle of the floor. And it worked, and it took him out of rhythm. And I think he was like 1 of 14 for a while, and he finished 4 of 21 from the field for only 10 points. Like if you hold that guy, and they're missing, Scoot didn't play in this game. They've got several injuries that they were dealing with. Shaden Sharp wasn't in this game either. So you hold that guy to 10 points, and you're probably going to have a good time. And I thought first half defense was really great. Second half defense held on, but overall sloppy game from the Hornets. Offensively bad, turnovers all over the place. Bridges turning it over. Brandon Miller turning it over a lot.
Yeah.
And the saving grace for them offensively was that you had this like Cody Martin, especially in the third quarter, Cody Martin connection with Nick Richards, who was dominating Ayton inside. And they were zoning up against Ayton, so Ayton had a good game, and it wasn't really particularly Nick Richards' fault that Ayton had a good game, but Nick Richards gave it back to him, 21 points, 10 rebounds in this one. He was all over it.
Second half was excellent. Yeah. I think 17 points. Is that right? 17 scored in the second half for Nick Richards.
He's the only one that looked like he had any energy and like wanted to win the game. I mean, him and Martin and I think Micic, those are sort of my 3 stars. It wasn't Bridges, wasn't Miller. I think it was those 3 guys who kind of stepped up and got them, kind of drugged them to this win. Had they played any other team, Walker, I mean, I'm including the Wizards, I'm including the San Antonio Spurs, who they lost to, Detroit, they've lost to a couple times. Yeah. Like, they've lost this game before. They only won it by virtue of the fact, and Clifford sort of hit the nail on the head at the end of the game, they're trying. They're sloppy, they're not doing the right things offensively, they're not moving the basketball, but defensively they're trying, and that will, against a team like Portland, will help kind of get you, kind of grit your teeth and get you through the game.
Which shows you, even with Portland already being bad at full health, and they also are missing a couple of guys, that's something that is you should walk away with a victory. This is one where I don't even know what the line was on this game, Doug, but if we're talking injuries, maybe with home court being there, maybe Vegas is still disrespecting the Hornets at a level that had them as underdogs. I felt, as a new looks Hornets fan, I felt like they should win this game, and they did. But I think you're right, too. Man, it's weird. They held Portland to 80 points, and I think the defense was good, but I think there were even problems defensively at a couple of different places, especially in the second half. I thought there were some of those issues, but either way, they're still trying, and I think they're just maxing out at what they can do, and they are dealing with some injuries themselves, are the Hornets. As you mentioned, Seth Curry's not playing, and then, of course, Doug, we just haven't seen LaMelo come back. LaMelo, I was hopeful so once All-Star break was over, they start with a back-to-back. I thought, okay, it makes sense to not suit him up against Utah because you have Golden State the next night. So maybe what they do is they just play LaMelo against Golden State. You get the kind of fanfare, marquee matchup. So whatever, doesn't play there. Then you wait a couple of days, doesn't play against Portland. So I'm not telling you that I'm really, really worried, but man, like I was able to find some solace in, okay, well, maybe he just comes back the second night of a back-to-back. I expect him to come back at some point. We're still waiting a little bit, and I hope we don't have many more out designations for LaMelo.
Well, will that some point come before they are fully out of the play-in race? Because I just saw news come across my timeline that Trae Young is going to be reevaluated in 4 weeks, and Atlanta sits right there on the last play-in spot. And so, the Hornets playing better, 4 out of the last 5 are wins. But it's a tough schedule coming up. They've still got games again. They've got a game against the Bucks coming up. They play Philadelphia, and this stretch of games, despite being somewhat rested coming off, and certainly tanned coming off of the All-Star break, they still are in a weird stretch of games where you're not getting 2 nights off for a while, and that can be taxing, especially when you factor in that they've had to go immediately out west and play a tough team in Golden State. And so they're being challenged right now. And everything that we talk about in terms of criticisms of the offense, in terms of the decision-making, whether it be from Bridges or Miller or Grant Williams, I thought had a tough game against Portland, decision-making-wise. All of this stuff really tangentially means one thing. The Hornets need LaMelo Ball back in the lineup if they have a puncher's chance at making this 20 out of 28 miracle run that they've got to make to get into the play-in, because they need his playmaking, they need his shooting, they need just his ability to take over in a fourth quarter and drag them offensively to a victory. That's what they need. They need that star power. All of this, there were some whispers, after they started off so well with the new crew, they're like, oh, well, I don't know if they even need LaMelo anymore. And that's crazy. Like, you need talent to win in the NBA. And LaMelo, when he is healthy, is extremely talented. They need him. Look, 2 losses of Bertans and Curry. Look what it's done to the offense. Like, this is still a team, despite getting better after the trade deadline, this is still a team with thin margins. You cannot lose guys, and you need LaMelo back.
You absolutely need LaMelo back. That anybody say it's one of those. It happens all the time. A star goes out. Wait, or, does it actually help this team that they're not relying so much on the star and now everybody's eating and maybe it makes them better when he's out? You see this with a bunch of different teams. It's not true there. It's not true with LaMelo. They need LaMelo back pretty badly offensively as well. I'm just not as badly as before, because you were relying on guys that had played 20 games ever in an NBA career, and now you have Micic, who, hadn't played a lot in the NBA, but we know what he did with EuroLeague. And you have Trey Mann, who at least has been in the league a couple of years and is talented enough. So, maybe you didn't need him as badly, but you still need him badly. Like, let's not get it too twisted here. And hopefully LaMelo comes back sooner rather than later. Maybe we finish up some of these thoughts on Portland, and then we go to that Golden State game coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
That Golden State game lasted forever. It was brutal. It was stinky as well. Yes, Doug is holding his nose for a good reason. And the other reason that it lasted so long is because there was a little kerfuffle at the end that prolonged this. And so then we were watching not the game, but the fight, quote unquote. We'll talk about that in just a moment on Locked On. Before we get to the kerfuffle, as I like to say, let's talk about Grammarly first. This episode is brought to you by Grammarly. No matter what kind of work you do, how you communicate is key. All those emails, reports, and presentations are equally important to the collaboration needed to get things done, and Grammarly can help. Grammarly is your AI writing partner to help you communicate more effectively and efficiently so you can make a bigger impact at work. 96% of Grammarly users report that Grammarly helps them craft more impactful writing. Grammarly works across 500,000 apps and websites, and by understanding your writing and context, Grammarly provides relevant, personalized suggestions. Their tone suggestions help you navigate even the most difficult work conversations as well. Make a bigger impact at work with Grammarly. You can sign up and download for free at Grammarly.com/podcast. That's Grammarly.com, Grammarly, Grammarly.com/podcast. Easier said, done. Go to Grammarly.com. More Locked On Hornets ahead. All right, just finishing up some Portland thoughts here recently. Don't have too much to add. I will say, so all of the problems going back to not having LaMelo, I think that's 85% of the problems right now. I do think there's one other thing that's happening. I think Mark Williams being out does have an impact too. And I think what's happening is that's because of lack of big man depth. And so, Doug, Grant Williams, I thought the first 3 games they played before the All-Star break, I thought Grant defensively was good. I thought he was, again, stopping those guys from getting any momentum down low. And it was really tough to gain leverage on Grant because he is such a strong dude and he's not afraid to use his body whatsoever. And that's true even these next couple of games. I do think, though, we are seeing somewhat of a similar problem even when PJ was in there. The rebounding is a different story. But, okay, they were getting hurt defensively even when PJ was at the center position. PJ has a longer wingspan and is taller. And that's something that I think would help contesting shots at the rim, where Grant is just giving you none of that either. And I think that you've seen some of those deficiencies even still with the big man depth or lack thereof. And so when Nick Richards balls out, Nick Richards was good last night, and you're right, I thought he was one of the more energetic guys. You still have this problem of when Nick Richards goes to the bench, then they're a little susceptible down low. Whereas when Grant is hitting shots like he was, what was it, against Utah, then who cares? Like if Grant goes 6 3-pointers, then Utah is the one with the problem, and they have to adapt to us, not the other way around. And so they get the win against Portland. But I do think the big man depth, you just need one other tall guy. Because now it's when Nick Richards needs a breather, you can't go anywhere. Remember, Nathan Mensah used to be kind of that, but it's still way better to play Grant Williams small ball 5 than it is Nathan Mensah. And so Mark playing himself, that would be great, but also having some big man depth. And we don't even know when Mark's coming back. We're getting close to that timeline Mitch Kupchak gave us in post-trade deadline media availability. So that will be another thing to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I mean, it really all comes down to how often you have to play Grant Williams at that center position. Like, I think it's super effective if you give it to teams in doses, but if teams have time to adjust to it, if teams have time to stretch Grant Williams out a little bit, then that's where the problem comes. Look, Portland had 22 offensive rebounds in this game. You typically lose those games. That's how bad Portland was offensively, that the Hornets were able to overcome the fact that they gave up 22 offensive rebounds, and they had a ton of turnovers too. Like, again, you lose that game against any other team except this miserable Portland team. And so, yes, I totally agree. I would expect, I think, if Mark Williams is going to miss the rest of the season and the Hornets stay, flirting with that final play-in spot, or they climb their way in, I would expect the Hornets to play this a Bolden guy that they got from Milwaukee, because I just don't think you can sustain as much play at the center position as we've seen from Grant Williams. And you're totally right. If Grant Williams is hitting a bunch of three-point shots, net rating-wise, offense to defense, and all the rebounding stuff, you throw that out the window. But if he's not hitting shots, then it's a problem.
Which is the difference, right? Because PJ was so inconsistent from 3, but Grant isn't. Like, Grant's just pretty much a legitimate good 3-point shooter. And so you probably have something more reliable there offensively than you did with PJ. And so that is the difference. At least, on a night in, night out basis, what you're going to get, where the problem with PJ offensively was, while he was finishing a lot better at the rim, the 3-point ball after the first 3 years in the league just wasn't as effective. And so those are some people love making the Grant PJ parallels. Like, there are some similarities, but you have a lot more reliability on, I know what I'm getting offensively from Grant. If he can make threes, great. If not, it's going to get a little wonky and a little troublesome. So they'd need big man depth. That's what they need at the center position. Let's go to Golden State, man. Golden State, look, terrible game.
90s style rock fight is what I called it.
They've had a couple of rock
Heat.
fights.
92.
Yes. I'm pretty sure I saw Jeff Van Gundy dragging somebody's ankles there or holding on to him at some point. So we can go to some ugly basketball. Micic, God bless him. Eric Collins felt worse for Micic than I've seen him feel in a while for a Hornets player, because it had been back-to-back games where he just couldn't buy a shot. And Golden State was no different. He was 4 of 13, but 2 of 7 from 3-point range. He got it going a little bit later. Either way, they lose 97-84. Not really the story. The story is at the end of this game. What's his name? It's Lester Quinones. Quinones. Thank you. Lester Quinones decides to cut towards the basket at the end when it was already over. There was a couple of seconds on the shot clock, and he decides to go try to hit a bucket, and Miles Bridges takes umbrage with it. So Miles Bridges, if you will. Miles Umbridges. There we go.
There you go.
Yes!
You found it.
We did. Miles Umbridges goes to Quinones and has a problem and gives him a little shove, Doug. And Lester was about it. So he's about it, going face to face with Miles. But then Grant Williams, talk about all about the smoke, runs in from, way far out on the opposite end of the court. He runs in, gets in his face. Quinones calls him the B word, like with the most emphasis on that B word I've ever seen. You could read it from, 4 miles away. You could read his lips. Oh, I know exactly what he said. I don't need a magnifying glass, nothing. So all of that happens, whatever, unwritten rules of basketball, Draymond's comments. We can get to those in a second. I think people are missing the Miles Bridges aspect of this. Everybody is discussing Draymond's comments on Grant Williams. He's a fake tough guy. than saying Draymond doesn't have any self-awareness. All that can be true, whatever, right? I thought watching Miles was interesting here, Doug, because Miles has a problem at first, gives Quinones a little bit of a push. He backs up, he bucks up to him. Miles, understanding the situation, he starts to walk away.
Growth.
And then so now, right, you have a group of people. Brandon Miller's in there, Grant Williams, a few Warriors players, but where's Miles? Miles is not off in the distance.
Miles away.
Not miles away. There you go. Ooh, buddy, this is tough, but they need to be said. So he's a couple of steps away from the group, and he's talking to, I think, the official on the sideline or whatever. To me, like, this is still real recognition on Miles' part, understanding even if we're post All-Star break, even if we're, multiple games away from what's happened off court and why I got suspended, he knows he can't do that stuff right now. And I'm not even trying to give him credit. I just think we see Miles operate very differently in that situation pre-felony domestic violence arrest. Remember, we saw it in the play-in game where he's throwing a mouthpiece. He gets ejected. We've seen that Miles before where we were already saying, he's a little too hot-headed before. Like, maybe we calm down a little bit. That was even before he had the arrest happen, a couple of off seasons ago. I think Miles Bridges is very different in that interaction than what we saw, like, usually. And that was our first time seeing it.
Good, I guess. Yeah. I mean, from a lot of different perspectives, right? Because the Hornets can't afford to lose anyone.
It's the right play. I'm sorry. I know I talked a lot. No, it's the right play. I didn't mean to say it's just it's the right play for Miles. I just thought that was interesting because usually we'll see something different from him.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully you don't. And now this wasn't like a critical situation for the Charlotte Hornets. The buzzer had already sounded. I think he will have more tests like this to pass. In terms of his growth and maturity as a player, as a leader on this team. And he is that, despite everything that's happened, there's no doubt about it. He is a leader on this team. And so he has to act like it. And I'll just give you kind of rapid fire my thoughts on this fight. First of all, Quinones, Bush League. Like, go back to playing your couple minutes off the bench. Like, it's Bush League. Don't do that. But also Miles Bridges, don't let him score. Like, I will have the same opinion about this kind of thing every single time, which is if you don't want the team to do something Bush League, don't allow them to do something Bush League. Like, if we just talk about this game in general, the Hornets, and I know, look, plane troubles, didn't get into the hotel till 3 a.m., second night of a back-to-back, blah, 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 blah. If you don't have energy, you don't have energy, okay? And you showed it all game offensively. You didn't have the smoke. So don't have the smoke after not having the smoke. Pick one or the other. That's all I'm saying. And then on the Grant Williams fake tough guy stuff, well, sir, I'll say this. Having a fake tough guy on this team would be a significant upgrade to what this team had before, which is very real weak guys. Like, they didn't have any tough guys, fake or otherwise. So having someone that will step up and defend other players, and you want that off your bench, by the way. You don't want that your star players doing that or getting into any kind of trouble. But I love too Grant Williams. First, everyone in the NBA is a fake tough guy. Let me just say that right now. They make so much money.
That's the MO. That's the
They
MO.
don't want to lose money. They're smart enough now to understand, hey, I would rather miss a game because I'm resting a hurt knee than miss a game because I'm injured. And the biggest criticism for Draymond is that he doesn't understand that. They're like, hey, your team needs you to play in games. So please don't miss games for something silly like putting another player in a headlock. So props to Grant Williams for going in there and saying, hey, if you mess with us, I'm going to get in your face and tell you about it, okay? And there will be the threat. There is the threat of something happening, but something didn't happen. And I think that's important too, because the Hornets can't stand to miss anyone. Grant Williams, Seth Curry, Davis Bertans, all the way down the line. Maybe they can afford to miss Bryce McGowan's or JT Thor, but that's the extent of it. Like, you can't miss any of these new guys.
Well, and Draymond, it's like, hey, Draymond, yeah, you're calling him a fake tough guy. You're saying he's a real nice dude and he's a part of the Players Association. He's the vice president. He can't come out here acting like he's all tough. Draymond, it's called range and complexity of emotion. Like, you can have more than just be the grumpy dude constantly and try to fight people. Like, you can do more than that. Believe it or not, the human body, the human brain, it is capable of more emotions than just anger and aggression. Like, that is something that is possible. And I think when Grant Williams sees that, when he sees his teammates mixing it up, then the nice guy does decide that, you know what, I'm going to defend my group. It's the classic that it's kindness is mistaken for weakness. And just because Grant Williams might be a nice dude off of the court, we know that Grant Williams also is going to be here for defending his teammates. It didn't seem like he was as ready as anybody else was. Like, I'm not saying that Grant Williams was ready to throw a punch, but nobody threw any real punch. I guess Canones did. But, like, we're talking about Grant Williams being ready for pretty much everything else that everybody else was, right? Like, he at the very least matched everyone's energy. And then Draymond is, one, Miles can do no wrong in my book. Okay. I get why you said it. Michigan State, you share an agent. Okay. What still? That's problematic. And then you say Grant Williams is a fake tough guy. All right. It's just, Draymond.
It's called good judgment. Draymond doesn't understand that, but it's called good judgment.
Oh, man. All right, let's move on. One more segment to go. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
We'll give you some of the finishing thoughts on Portland, on Golden State, what's expected, injuries, all that good stuff. We'll finish up with some of the other content that we have planned coming up next on Locked On Hornets. Before we get to the last segment, did want to mention that this episode is brought to you by Stitch Fix. You know what? You know that instant confidence boost you get from an outfit that makes you look really good? That's what you get with Stitch Fix. With Stitch Fix, you can get a stylist who understands your style, size, and budget, and they do all of the shopping for you. It's the easiest way to update your wardrobe this season. Easily upgrade your wardrobe with this year with a professional stylist that helps you find new on-trend favorites that will work for you. And then you can give your stylist your size, style, and budget preferences. You can order boxes when you want to and how you want to. No subscription required. And they can send 5 pieces of whatever the outfit is that you choose, outfit recommendations. They give you pro styling advice, and then you can keep going with what works. That's kind of how this works when you go to Stitch Fix. Stitch Fix makes it all so easy. I don't even like to shop, and they can save me that time and effort. Plus, I can get outfits that make me look very good. At least try to with Stitch Fix. Style that makes you feel as good as you look. Get started today at stitchfix.com/lockedon. That's stitchfix.com/lockedon. One more time, stitchfix.com/lockedon. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Okay, Doug, so the Hornets have been playing significantly better. They're playing like a real NBA team since they traded for all these guys. But you mentioned how Golden State was a rock fight. That was hard to watch. And then against Portland, that one was hard to watch. And the only reason they win that game is because of good defense, but also Portland, they got lucky with the three-point shot. Like, Portland going 3 for over 30 is pretty tough. And you mentioned it too. Like, it feels like they lose that game if it's anybody but the Trailblazers that they're going against. How haunted is the house still that Steve Clifford is coaching, especially with LaMelo not out there on the floor?
Well, you have some injuries again, right? I mean, you have the Davis Bertans hyperextension of the knee. I don't think that's like major serious, but it has kept him out of 2 games now. And then Seth Curry, that felt like a maintenance, hey, it looks like Portland, they were already bad, and now they've got a couple of injuries, a couple of guys that they were holding out, so maybe we just get him 100%. That's what it seems like. But it is going to, anytime anyone is injured on this team, it's going to scare fans and think that the house is still haunted. So, yes, they are working to exorcise demons like they did against Portland and Utah, but there are still a few ghosts hanging around the house, and the tension is still high, and the margins are still thin. And, I think, Walker, when you look at the offensive struggles, because defensive rating-wise, they're the best team defensively in the NBA since the All-Star break, number 1. And yet, net rating-wise, they're like hovering around the bottom of the top 10 because the offense has been lagging significantly behind the defense. And I think, it all goes back to LaMelo's absence, but even taking a finer look at it, I think when the trade deadline players started to come into the lineup, you saw Bridges and Brandon almost take a sigh and exhale of relief because they had been holding so much of the team's responsibility offensively in their hands, and it wasn't going well. It was resulting in turnovers. It was resulting in one pass or one pick possessions and pull-ups, contested pull-ups, and bad misses that then hurt your defense because you had to get into transition all the time. And so they started to cede a little bit of the responsibility to those other players, and it was guys like Mann and Micic and Grant Williams who weren't afraid to move the basketball around the floor. And now all of a sudden, the ball's zipping around, 4 or 5 pass possessions. Defenses don't know what to do. They were catching teams off guard. Then they get into Golden State, and you had all of the difficulty with the second night of the back-to-back and the hotel and not getting in and such and such and such. Came out with bad energy. They faced a little adversity, got into that rock fight, couldn't do anything offensively. And now you see the follow-up in Portland is that you once again, Bridges and Miller are taking more of that offensive playmaking responsibility and not exactly able to do positive things with it consistently enough to produce good offense. You have Brandon Miller, who for some reason is putting like so much mustard on these passes to Nick Richards. I'm afraid like Nick Richards is just going to come up with like a hole in his hand at one point where the basketball has just completely gone through his hand.
There was one in particularly hot one that he tried to deliver. Yeah,
Eric some hot salamis into Nick Richards. It is crazy. You have Miles Bridges. He gets a bad pass to Miles Bridges, or not a great pass, and he catches it sort of awkwardly in a position underneath the basket where his back turns to the basket. All he has to do is just dribble it out. There's plenty of time. There's like 13 seconds left on the shot clock. Dribble it out, 1 or 2 more passes, get a better shot. Instead, he just like quickly chucks it up. And then Portland takes that into transition and scores. It's decision-making that is killing the Hornets right now. It's not even missed shots on the offensive end. It's just such poor decision-making, and it's happening at the top. And I think that's why you need LaMelo back in there so that these guys don't feel like it's all on them to fix it.
Well, and even so, LaMelo, I think some people would criticize that they don't like LaMelo's decision-making all that much. It's just that LaMelo is so good with the ball in his hands out at the perimeter that he's going to create something. And that's how he's able to create something for everybody else that they don't have to shoulder all that responsibility, which is a big deal. Brandon Miller, even when he took over for that stretch that LaMelo was out and he had the great January, he was very good. So even when he has that crazy month, it still feels like Brandon is better as that secondary ball handler, that you don't want to put him at the point guard all the time. And that's even with him still being able to play point guard in a pinch for sure. Same thing with Miles Bridges. We know that about Miles. Like, that's not anything new. So when LaMelo comes back in, man, it's just more talent. And then when you're injecting that kind of talent that was playing at a certainly all-star level before he was hurt, then it feels like everybody should be better, right? Brandon Miller being fed in open spots. Same thing with Miles. We know the two-man game between Melo and Miles is so good. And Nick Richards being fed some lobs. So, yeah, man. And now what's exciting is LaMelo and Micic out on the floor at the same time. It's going to be the electric factory out there. Like, that would be so fun to see the kind of crazy passes that'll be rolling around. So once LaMelo, we want him back, man. We want him back, and hopefully he can come back sooner rather than later. Don't know exactly when that's going to be.
Yeah, we should talk more extensively tomorrow when David's on the show about this idea of starting Trey Mann, only playing him 24 minutes. He's really like a bench starter. And then not closing the game with him, and instead Clifford goes to Micic. We should talk extensively about that, but just to relate that to what we're talking about here, I think that's happening less because of what Trey Mann is or isn't contributing, and more about Clifford needing someone out there that can make a good decision with the basketball in their hands and make good passes. And Micic gives you more of those than Mann does. And it's also about him wanting to stick with Cody Martin in these closing lineups because Clifford trusts Cody Martin more than any other player on this team to shut down the opposing team's best player. And look, so far you cannot argue with the results. He's done it to Trae Young. He did it to Simons. He's out there balling out. And look, Mann is too. Mann has a crazy step back jumper every single game that you go, wow. And he starts every game, getting out of the passing lanes and getting deflections. I can't find much wrong with what Mann's doing. It's that just a couple of players on this lineup are doing certain things better than he is. and it's forcing him out of the lineup. I think when LaMelo comes back, you could still make an argument for Man starting, but so much of their problems are because they don't have enough playmaking on the floor.
Yeah, that's true. All right, we'll see when LaMelo can come back. Mark Williams and Seth and Davies. Yeah, you're right. The house is still a little haunted. Just a little bit, but hopefully they get exercise those demons as they go on. That'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast, and that includes YouTube. Make sure you subscribe as well. When you subscribe and then you click on the notifications, then your phone will let you know when we drop an episode. It's great, and that will give you some shot of dopamine when you see that Locked On Hornets just dropped a new episode. By the way, with us being on YouTube, Doug, people are starting to see our bright and smiley and shiny faces, and so people are shouting us out, which is my favorite. Anytime I'm at Hopfly, I saw my guy Ben. Big shout out to Ben, who watches the podcast and listens to us. We really appreciate everybody's support.
Did he mention me? I mean, it's fine about you, but did he say anything about me? Okay, great.
He did.
Thanks,
he made sure to say that Doug was the man and that you were his favorite. I'm not lying about any of that. So a big shout out to Ben. We really appreciate it. YouTube, wherever you get your pods, and then of course make sure you check out Locked On NBA and the Locked On 24/7 stream on YouTube. All of the great content that Locked On Podcast Network has to offer. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow.